Everybody, it's Johnny Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to The Fall of the Abbasids by Epic History TV. Now if you haven't seen my reaction to The Rise of the Abbasids by Epic History TV, I suggest you check out that video before checking this one out. And anyway, and also when I'm recording this is not long after I finished reacting to the series by Kings and Generals about the early Muslim expansion, and not just because it was requested, but it just got me thinking it'll be a decent change, because most of what I've reacted to is mostly European history, so it's a decent change it's a nice change of pace. So and of course I've always said it's always best to learn about history with an open mind, rather than the closed-minded prejudices that we've still got. But anyway, that's a bit too much of a ramble. So yeah. So I've said all I've said about that. So the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go and subscribe to Epic History TV. In my opinion, one of the best history channels here on YouTube, amongst several. And not much more I can add. So let's get this up on screen and captions on, because I do that for most historical videos. And let's get into this.
8th century Middle East. A new dynasty seized control of one of...
Yeah, bear in mind, this was not long after the Umayyads.
The world's greatest empires.
God, that's a bit loud.
The Islamic Caliphate. Though little remembered in the West today, the Abbasids...
I think it started off as the Rashidun, and then the Umayyads, and now the Abbasids.
reigned for 5 centuries.
Oops.
They oversaw an era of Islamic military dominance, city building, brilliant scholarship, and technological innovation. It has come to be remembered as Islam's golden age.
I didn't want to say anything because
this is the story.
The reason why I didn't say it, because I had a feeling you would bring it up as Islam's golden age, which is true, because like even scholars from around the world, I think, once came to see the libraries in Baghdad, and I think it was like either decades or a century after this, it'll be the capital of the Saracen Empire during the Crusades. But I might be wrong on that, because I'm just going on what I remember.
Of the Abbasid Caliphate.
The fall. Oh, here we go.
It's great to welcome back as video sponsors Raid Shadow.
Feel free to check out Raid if you're interested. Anyway, what's this? And Al-Rashid had sown amongst them constant warfare, so woe to the subjects in the future. Ibn al-Kifti? I probably butchered that. Historian. Ibn al-Kifti, hopefully I got that right.
The Abbasid Caliphate had flourished under the reign of Caliph Harun al-Rashid. And to ensure its continued success, he arranged his succession in a way that he believed would ensure stability and peace. His son, Muhammad, was to be his heir, but in a move common since the time of the Umayyads, he also named another son, Abdullah, as Muhammad's heir. It proved a recipe for disaster. In 809, in Baghdad, Muhammad succeeded his father as Caliph, taking the title Al-Amin, the Trustworthy. His half-brother, Abdullah, became governor of Khorasan with the title Al-Ma'mun, the Trusted One. Rival factions soon formed at both courts. In Baghdad, Al-Amin's advisors urged him to remove his brother from the succession. And just a year into his reign, he tore up his father's arrangement.
Wow.
Al-Mamun was furious.
I can
Fraternal
imagine.
distrust exploded into civil war.
So another fitna.
Al-Mamun's Khorasani forces won a great victory against a much larger force at Ray, and marched on to besiege Baghdad in 812. After a bloody year-long siege, the city fell. Caliph Al-Amin was captured as he tried to flee, and executed. Initially, Al-Mamun ruled the caliphate from his old base at Merv. Here, in an effort to widen his support after the civil war, he fostered a new alliance with the Alids. This powerful family was descended from Ali, fourth caliph and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. They'd later become leaders of Shia Islam, the branch of Islam that believes true spiritual authority belongs to Ali's descendants. Instead of traditional Abbasid black, Al-Mamun's court began to wear green, a colour associated with the Alids. Al-Mamun even married two of his daughters into the Alid family.
Wow.
And made Alid Imam Ali al-Rida his heir apparent.
Wow.
But these policies sparked hostility back in Iraq and led to major revolts in Baghdad. After 6 years, the Caliph moved the capital back there to restore order and abandoned his Alid alliance. Al-Mamun is...
So in other words, he was in a catch-22. Don't ask me why it's called that.
also remembered for his attempts to impose a new religious doctrine on the Caliphate.
Okay.
He first invited distinguished scholars to Baghdad to discuss theological issues, such as the deeds of the companions of the Prophet, the Hadiths, and the nature of the Quran. However, his pronouncement that the Quran was at some point created by God, rather than co-eternal with God, encountered bitter resistance. 18 years of religious persecution followed, a period known as the Minha, or Inquisition, which saw dissenting scholars imprisoned or even executed.
So basically, a Muslim version of the Spanish Inquisition. That's what it sounds like to me.
In 833, Al-Mamun was succeeded by his brother, who took the title Al-Mutasim. He'd prove far less interested in theological debate than the clash of arms.
When troops are all one race, dangers arise. They lack zeal, and they are apt to be disorderly. It is necessary that they should be of different races. Nizam al-Mulk, Persian scholar. Wow, that's a different... I've never heard that one before. I suppose it does make sense in a way.
The armies of the Abbasid Caliphate, renowned in battle, were drawn from both Arab and non-Arab subjects. The Khorasanis, soldiers of the frontier province of Khorasan, were the troops who'd helped propel the Abbasids to power during the Third Fitna, or Islamic Civil War. Drawing on Persian and steppe warrior traditions, their ranks included both armoured infantry and heavy armoured cavalry, similar to European knights. The descendants of Khorasanis who settled near Baghdad were known as Abna al-Khorasan, sons of the people of Khorasan. Famed as elite and versatile infantrymen, they formed the loyal core of the Caliph's army. Other notable contingents included the Dailamis, expert skirmishers from the highlands of northern Persia. while African troops, including military slaves and Muslim converts from Ethiopia, fought as heavy infantry, armed with shield, sword, and spear. The great Caliph Harun al-Rashid was known to have an elite bodyguard of 40 African soldiers. Abbasid armies were particularly skilled in siege warfare and made expert use of catapults, mangonels, and battering rams. They even had specialist troops armed with naphtha or petroleum-based fire weapons. No contemporary illustrations are known, but they're thought to have been similar to this slightly later Byzantine illustration.
So basically it's their version of Greek fire.
The 9th century, however, would see changes so radical that some historians have termed it a military revolution. During the civil war between al-Rashid's sons, al-Mu'tasim had begun to expand his military retinue by purchasing Turkish slave soldiers. His favourite supplier was the Samanid family, governors of Transoxiana. These slave soldiers were seized from their villages as boys, or bought in slave markets, then sent for intensive military training alongside an Islamic education. They emerged as formidable cavalrymen and superbly skilled mounted archers. Al-Jahith, a contemporary, wrote of them with awe. The Turks are as good as others with the lance, and in addition, if 1,000 of their horsemen are hard-pressed, they will loose all their arrows in a single volley and bring down 1,000 enemy horsemen.
Especially if they're part from the lands that used to be part of the Parthian Empire, because I don't know if I got this right, but they famed for their horse archers, especially with the Parthian shot, which basically, not sure if the Parthians invented it, but the Parthian shot is basically where they can ride straight forward and turn their upper bodies until they're firing right behind them in a 180-like motion. Probably some of the best ever in the world. And explain that's hard to do enough just by if you try to run and shoot backwards, but probably not as easy when you're on a horseback for obvious reasons. But it's a good way to adapt to the tactic of most hit and run archers. For most horse archers is their famous hit and run tactics.
No body of men can stand up to such a test. Historians dispute the exact timeline, but at some point in the 9th century, these Turkish slave soldiers, known as Mamluks, had come to form an elite corps within the Abbasid army, one that was personally loyal to the Caliph and could be used to intimidate his political rivals. Turkish officers, despite their initial outsider status and ignorance of Arabic language and customs, began to wield huge influence at the Caliph's court. This offended the old nobility, many of whom also stopped receiving traditional diwan payments for their military service. The discontent even pushed some soldiers to riot in the streets of Baghdad.
Wow.
To ease tension, al-Mu'tasim constructed a new city for the Turkish military elite, Samarra.
On the Tigris
This was
River.
where he garrisoned the Turks and rewarded their commanders with land. And it's where, in 848, work began on the world's largest mosque and its famous spiral minaret. Al-Mu'tasim's reliance on slave soldiers to shore up his power had destroyed centuries of military tradition, and it had sown the seeds of future turmoil.
Yep.
2 years later, the Caliph led his formidable new army against the old foe, the Eastern Roman,
Well, I suppose you can understand the Arab nobles, disdain for these foreign soldiers, especially as the narrator put it, that these outsiders are suddenly, part of the Caliph's inner circle, and your pension is ruined, or DEMA payments, or I call it, it's basically like a retirement fund, has been ruined because these outsiders are gaining more influence.
Byzantine Empire.
That's how it sounds.
The campaign ended in a great victory, the capture and sack of Amorium. O day of the Battle of Amorium, our hopes have returned from you, overflowing with honey-sweet milk, wrote Arab poet Abu Tamam. But even such victories failed to ease the tension between Turkish officers and Abbasid nobles. Some nobles even plotted to overthrow al-Mutasim and expel the Turks. But their conspiracy was discovered, and they were executed.
The Turks have become master of the realm. The world must fall silent and obey. Al-Musidi, historian. I'm sorry if I'm butchering any of these names or pronunciations.
Al-Mutasim was succeeded by his eldest son, Al-Vathik. Following his unexpected death, a second son, Al-Mutawakkil, took the throne, backed by the Turk generals. They'd hoped for a pliable puppet, but instead, Al-Mutawakkil decided it was time to reassert caliphal authority. On his orders, several Turkish leaders were assassinated.
Wow.
And he tried to use Arab and Armenian troops to counterbalance their influence. But the Turks struck back. In 861, the Caliph was assassinated by his own bodyguards. The chaos and civil war that followed is known as the Decade of Anarchy. 4 caliphs took power, all puppets of the Turkish military elite. Each, in turn, was violently overthrown. Order was only restored with the accession of Caliph al-Mu'tamid in 870. But the anarchy had irreparably damaged the Caliph's authority. Even before the Abbasids came to power, the vast Caliphate had struggled to maintain control of its many regions. Abbasid authority west of Egypt.
Go back. It's like even the Umayyads had problems. Like you had the Zubayrids who rebelled and eventually put down, and the Kharijites. And then you had multiple regions over here, like the Sind, and some of these they could not conquer, especially in this region here, if I remember rightly. So things were better on their western front than on their eastern front.
Many regions. Abbasid authority west of Egypt had long been largely theoretical. But now, multiple major uprisings broke out as local governors and warlords staked out their own claims to rule. Egypt, fertile and prosperous, was an early casualty, lost to a rebel Turkish commander who founded his own Tulunid dynasty. In southern Iraq, a major revolt broke out among agricultural slaves from Eastern Africa, known as Zanj. The 14-year uprising devastated the region and severely disrupted Abbasid tax income and Baghdad's food supply. In Afghanistan, a coppersmith named Yaqub al-Safar made an astonishing rise to power founding his own Safarid dynasty and conquering much of eastern Persia. His advance was only halted at the Battle of Deir al-Akul in 876. In such turbulent times, Abbasid caliphs struggled to impose their authority. But there were some successes. Caliph al-Mu'tadid engineered a brief Abbasid resurgence, thanks to military campaigning and shrewd diplomacy, notably his marriage to the daughter of the Tulunid ruler of Egypt. She was the celebrated Qutr al-Nada. Her name means dewdrop. One scholar described her as one of the most intelligent and regal women who ever lived. When al-Mu'tadid told his bride,
Wow.
"You've done well for yourself by marrying the Caliph.
Oh,
what
wow.
more could you thank God for?" She replied, "You've done well for yourself. This makes my father your subject. What more could you thank God for?"
Wow.
Her bold response was a sign of her character, as well as the delicate new balance of power between Abbasid caliphs and some of their more powerful subjects. During the reign of al-Mu'tadid's son, al-Muqtafi, Tulunid Egypt was fully reabsorbed into the Abbasid Caliphate. But elsewhere, the news was dire. Abbasid authority collapsed in Arabia, where one Shiite group, the Qarmatians, even began attacking pilgrims on their way to Holy Mecca.
Wow.
In 930, they stole the Black Stone, the Holy of Holies, from the Kaaba.
That's some achievement, because isn't that like what? Isn't that black isn't that huge thing like hundreds, like over 500 tons or something? Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about that.
A terrible blow to Abbasid prestige. In Central Asia, the Persian Samanids carved out their own empire and declared independence. This was the height of the so-called Persian Intermezzo, when native Persian dynasties ruled in Persia once more.
First time Persians had their own dynasty since the time of the Sassanids.
Increasingly, the Abbasid Caliph was said to reign, but not rule. He'd become a symbol without power, often under the thumb of his vizier. By the 930s, the Caliph had lost control of both the civilian administration and army command, which was handed over to a new official, the Amir al-Umara, commander of the commanders.
Okay.
The final humiliation came in 945. The Buyids were Shiite warlords from the Dailam mountains of northwestern Persia, but their first success was in Fars, before they went on to seize control of Persia and Iraq. Their triumphal entry into Baghdad was a deep humiliation for the Sunni Abbasids. Yet they retained the title of Caliph, as no more than figureheads under Buyid command, and spectators to these turbulent times. 2 decades later, another Shiite dynasty, the Fatimids, swept along the North African coast, conquered Egypt, and founded Cairo as the capital of their own caliphate.
Ah, so that's when Cairo became the capital. Because for a long time, the capital of Egypt was Alexandria.
Some historians label this the Shiite century, with Shiite dynasties ruling twin caliphates and dominating much of the Muslim world. But it was not to last. A dangerous new Sunni power was poised to burst out of Central Asia.
Oh, wow.
The Seljuk Turks.
Okay. I have heard of the Seljuk Turks because they beat the Eastern Romans or Byzantines at Manzikert. I only know about that briefly. And part of that reason is due to playing the game Age of Empires 2. So that's to my shame, unfortunately. The Sunni Revival.
The Seljuk Turks were pastoralists, nomadic livestock farmers from the Central Asian steppe. They were fierce warriors who became champions of Sunni Islam. At the end of the 10th century, possibly in response to climate change, they swept south into Khorasan. The Ghaznavid Empire, successor to the Samanids, was first to fall. The Seljuk Turks were unstoppable, surging westwards across the Persian plateau, taking Baghdad and toppling the Buyids, crushing a Byzantine army at Manzikert, and forging the great Seljuk Empire.
Yep. Yeah, as I said, that's the battle between Turks and Byzantines that I know of, which was pretty much the downfall of the rest of the Byzantine Empire. Because I mean, it'd been struggling against the Abbasids and, well, the Caliphate, basically, I should say. But now it's an even bigger blow at Manzikert. But again, like every other empire, the Byzantines have been being formerly Roman. They were suffering with their own internal problems, which also kind of led to their downfall as well.
Their triumph was tempered by the arrival of European crusaders, who took Jerusalem in 1099 and carved out a series of crusader states. One Shia sect, shrouded in legend, struck back at the Seljuks with deadly precision. In 1092, Nizam
Assassination of Nizam al-Mulk.
Al-Mulk, vizier of the Seljuk Empire, was killed by the Order of Assassins, its hit squad disguised as Sufi mystics. The Assassins, or Hashashin as they're known in Arabic, were a new Ismaili military order formed in the mountains of northwestern Persia. Facing power...
I think the only, like, proper assassin or Hashashin base that I've heard of is in Alamut, which I believe is in northern Iran, like you said, in northwest Persia.
Powerful enemies, but without an army of their own, they turned to subterfuge and assassination to achieve their goals. Many fanciful stories are told about the assassins, but the order was real and feared, and responsible for scores of political murders.
And the inspiration for a somewhat successful game series
over the next 2 centuries.
Sorry, I just thought I had that in.
Under the Seljuks, Abbasid caliphs continued to reign as spiritual leaders and figureheads.
Yeah.
But the 12th century saw the fracturing of the great Seljuk Empire. A familiar story of disputed successions and local governors making their bid for power. Sensing weakness, in 1136, Abbasid Caliph al-Muqtafi raised his own army to reassert Abbasid independence for the first time in nearly 2 centuries. He took control of Baghdad, and in 1157 held it against a Seljuk siege. After generations of foreign subjugation, the Abbasids had re-emerged as an independent power. But it would soon all come crashing down.
They swept through the city like hungry falcons attacking a flight of doves, or like raging wolves attacking a sheep, as the population died at the hands of the invaders. Wasaf, historian. Wow, that's one.
In the 13th century, a new force from the east tore through the Islamic world, scattering armies and destroying every city that did not submit to them. The Mongols.
Oh, wow.
First to fall, the Khwarezmian Empire, successor to the Seljuks.
Yeah, I think the Khwarezm Empire fell because originally Genghis Khan, the leader of the Mongols, wanted to actually ally with him because he thought of him as a powerhouse and wanted to ally with such a powerhouse, but the Khwarezm leader decided to kill the messenger and send his head back to Genghis Khan, which unfortunately angered him so much he after Genghis Khan dealt with China, decide to take out the Persian Khwarezm Empire. And I think the capital city of the Khwarezm Empire at the time was either Samarkand or Bukhara, but I think it's Samarkand, which was apparently supposed to withstand the Mongols for 5 years. It only fell in 5 days. But again, I might be wrong.
Run by the Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan. By 1256,
oh yeah, that's the other name people know him by, is Chinggis.
His grandson, Hulagu, was poised to renew the onslaught. But first, he turned his attention to the assassins, rumoured to be plotting his death. The order was scattered and crushed. 2 years later, Hulagu advanced against the Abbasid Caliphate. As his armies neared Baghdad, he sent a stern warning to Caliph al-Mustasim, demanding the city's surrender. Despite the Mongols' terrifying record of destroying any city that opposed them, al-Mustasim decided Baghdad's walls could keep out any steppe nomads. He was wrong. After half Baghdad's garrison...
Bearing in mind, when I think if I remember this rightly, because the Mongols were the first army to ever get through the Great Wall of China and actually learned about some of China's siege weaponry, and they took these plans, and some of Genghis's advisors were Chinese, and his army learned from their plans about siege equipment and how effective it could be used, and learned of their effectiveness. And then, since then, when facing a enemy city or walled settlement, Genghis and his army would remember their knowledge of siege equipment.
Was massacred in a disastrous sortie. The city surrendered. But Hulagu was in no mood for mercy. A contemporary chronicler described the horrors that followed. The people of Baghdad were put to the sword and subjected to 40 days of killing, pillaging, and enslavement. They tortured people to extort their wealth. They killed men, women, and children.
Oh yes.
A great part of the city, including the Caliph's mosque, was burnt, and the city laid in ruins. The dead lay like mounds in the streets and markets. The death toll is unknown, but was in the many thousands. Allegedly, only Christians were spared, thanks to the intercession of Hulagu's Christian wife.
Okay.
Baghdad's libraries were destroyed, their books and manuscripts representing centuries of Muslim scholarship, were thrown into the Tigris River so that it was said to run black with ink. Al-Mustasim was forced.
Basically, that's another shame when invading armies, or sects, S-E-C-T-S, like, destroying places of knowledge, like, during the East, like, the Roman Catholics destroying pretty much half of the library in Alexandria because they claimed that this scientific knowledge was affront to God, which is bollocks. But anyway, I'm just not going to get into that, so...
to witness this terrible destruction.
So, yeah, so the Mongols here will basically destroy cities and kill people, and they do not discriminate.
Then, according to several sources, he was rolled in a carpet and trampled to death, as Mongols feared to spill royal blood. The last caliph of Baghdad was dead. Never again would the Abbasids hold meaningful political power. Al-Mustasim was not the last Abbasid caliph. The line would continue under the Mamluk Sultanate that now ruled Egypt. But his successors in Cairo were merely ceremonial figures, religious leaders with little power. The last caliph, Al-Mutawakkil III, surrendered to the Ottoman Empire in 1517.
Oh, wow.
And was taken away as a prisoner to Constantinople. It was a humiliating fate for a dynasty that had once ruled one of history's greatest empires. One that had dominated the Middle East, that had taken on and defeated the Byzantines in the West and Chinese in the East. That had overseen a great flourishing of scholarship, culture, technology and trade. And reigned over the era that is remembered as Islam's golden age. For centuries to come, Islamic leaders would assert their legitimacy by claiming descent from this one towering dynasty, the Abbasids. Thanks again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring the permission to use several of their images in this video. In the video description, we've included links to some of the titles that cover the military history of the Caliphate, with much more brilliant artwork. Thanks also to our series historical advisor, Professor Antoine Borut of the University of Maryland. You can find out more about Antoine's projects and publications via his university webpage using the link in the video description.
Okay, and that'll do it. This has been an interesting video, and so now we know how the Abbasid Caliphate fell. So yeah, there's not much more I can add to this. So that'll be the end of the video. If you like this reaction, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.